I never thought the crack of gunfire at dawn would be the sound that changed my life forever. But there it was, ripping through the thin veil of sleep as I jolted upright in my narrow bed at the edge of Harlan Ranch. The year was 1868, and West Texas was a land still bleeding from the Civil War's wounds. Vast, unforgiving plains where the sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, and the wind carried whispers of ghosts from battles long past. I'd only arrived the day before, a stranger in worn boots and a faded calico dress, seeking nothing more than honest work to keep my ailing mother fed back in our rundown shack near the Rio Grande. But fate, that cruel joker in the deck, had other plans. The shots came fast and furious, echoing off the towering adobe walls of the ranch house like thunderclaps in a dry canyon. I threw on my shawl and rushed to the window of the small servants' quarters Miss Eliza had assigned me, a no-nonsense woman with a tongue sharper than a Bowie knife, who'd eyed me like a hawk when I rolled up in my rickety wagon. "Clean only, girl," she'd snapped, adjusting her wire-rimmed spectacles. "Speak when spoken to, and for God's sake, steer clear of Mr. Harlan. He's got a temper hotter than August noon, and he don't take kindly to folks poking around his business." From my vantage, I could see the chaos unfolding in the pale light of breaking dawn. Rustlers, those low-down cattle thieves who'd been plaguing the frontier since the war ended, had struck hard. They were a ragged bunch, maybe 5 or 6, their horses kicking up dust as they tried to stampede a herd of longhorns from the corral. Bullets zinged through the air, splintering fence posts and sending the cattle bellowing in panic. And there, in the thick of it, stood Wyatt Harlan himself, the man whose name carried weight across 3 counties like a loaded 6-shooter. I'd heard tales of him on the trail ride in, tall as a cottonwood, unyielding as the rocky badlands, with eyes that brewed like a dust storm on the horizon. He was the heir to this sprawling spread, the wealthiest cattle baron this side of the Pecos, forged in the fires of grit and an iron will that brooked no weakness. The war had taken his father and brothers, leaving him to rebuild from the ashes, ruling his domain with a tight-fisted control that made even the toughest ranch hands think twice before crossing him. And now he was out there alone, revolver drawn, defending what was his with the ferocity of a cornered wolf. "Get off my land, you sons of bitches!" Wyatt's voice boomed across the yard, raw and commanding, cutting through the gunfire like a whip crack. He fired once, twice, his shots precise, dropping one rustler from his saddle with a guttural cry that sent a chill down my spine. Blood stained the dusty ground, dark and spreading like spilled ink under the rising sun. Another bandit wheeled his horse, aiming a rifle at Wyatt's broad back, but Wyatt spun, his coat flaring like a cape in the wind, and squeezed the trigger. The man crumpled, his horse bolting into the sagebrush. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of fear and something I couldn't name. Admiration, maybe, for a man who faced death without flinching. I'd seen violence before. The war had touched everyone, even us poor folk scraping by in shacks. My own hands were calloused from years of labor, shaped by sacrifice to care for Mama when fever took hold during those dark days. But this was raw, frontier justice, and it pulled at me like a riptide. The ranch hands, loyal men like old Jeb, the grizzled foreman with a limp from Gettysburg, and young Tommy, barely out of his teens with a quick smile and a harmonica in his pocket, finally spilled from the bunkhouse, rifles in hand.
"Boss, we're coming,"
Jeb shouted, his voice gravelly from years of dust and tobacco. They joined the fray, bullets flying as the remaining rustlers scattered, one taking a hit to the shoulder and cursing as he rode off into the haze. Wyatt stood there amid the settling dust, smoke curling from his revolver's barrel, his chest heaving. Blood trickled from a shallow graze on his arm, but he ignored it, holstering his gun with a steady hand. His face was a mask of stone, but I caught a flicker in those storm-gray eyes. Something haunted, like the war's echoes weren't just in the land, but buried deep in his soul. He barked orders to the hands. "Round up the strays, Jeb! Tommy, check the fences! And bury those bastards before the buzzards get 'em." As the sun climbed higher, painting the plains in gold and red, I slipped out to the kitchen, my mind racing. Miss Eliza was already there, stirring a pot of coffee with a scowl. "Heard the ruckus, did you? That's life out here, girl. Mr. Harlan don't tolerate thieves. Now get to scrubbin'. Floors first, then the parlor. And remember what I said. Stay out of his way." I nodded, tying an apron around my waist. but my thoughts lingered on Wyatt. What kind of man fought like that, alone against the odds? And why did the silence that followed the shootout feel heavier than the gunfire itself? The ranch house was grand in its weathered way. Wooden beams scarred by time, wide porches where rocking chairs creaked in the wind, adobe walls standing tall against the relentless sun. But inside it was shrouded in an oppressive quiet, broken only by the howl of canyons or the distant low of cattle. It was as if the war had stolen not just lives, but the very sound of living. I set to work, my bucket sloshing as I knelt on the rough-hewn floors, scrubbing away the dust that seemed to seep in from every crack. The work was familiar, grounding, much like the endless chores back home, where I'd rise before dawn to tend the garden, milk the cow and sit by Mama's bedside, whispering prayers as her coughs rattled through the night. "Lord, give me strength," I'd murmur, just as I did now under my breath. But here in this vast isolation, resilience felt like a lone cactus blooming in the desert. Beautiful, but sharp-edged. Hours passed, the sun baking the earth outside. When the first storm clouds gathered on the horizon, thunder rumbled like distant artillery, a reminder of the battles that had scarred this land 3 years ago. I was in the parlor polishing an old oak table when the door burst open. Rain lashed in sideways, and there he was, Wyatt Harlan, soaked to the bone, his hat dripping, boots tracking mud across the threshold I'd just cleaned. His eyes locked on me, cold and calculating like he was sizing up a wild Mustang. "Who the hell are you?" His voice cut like a whip, low and gravelly, carrying the weight of authority that made my pulse quicken despite myself. I stood tall, wiping my hands on my apron, refusing to cower. I'd faced worse, landlords demanding rent we couldn't pay, soldiers foraging during the war. "Eliza Thorne, sir." "The new help. Miss Eliza sent me." He grunted, shrugging off his wet coat and hanging it on a peg. Water pooled at his feet, but he didn't seem to notice. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall and broad-shouldered, his jaw set like granite, those eyes brewing with unspoken storms. The graze from the morning's shootout was bandaged roughly, a red stain seeping through. "Don't get in my way," he muttered, striding past me toward the study without another glance. But as he passed, a flicker crossed his face. Something raw, vanishing as quick as it came. It stirred something in me, a curiosity I couldn't shake. Who was this man, ruling his empire like a battlefield general, yet carrying ghosts that weighed him down? Wyatt's routine was as unyielding as the Texas sun. He rose before dawn, downing black coffee alone in the kitchen while the rest of us stirred. Then he'd saddle his bay stallion, Thunder, a beast as fierce as its name, and ride out across the range, inspecting herds with the precision of a sharpshooter. His orders were sparse, barked to Jeb or Tommy. "Move the herd to the north pasture. Fix that break in the wire." No wasted words, no warmth. The hands respected him, feared him even, but there was a loneliness in it, like he oversaw his spread from a solitary hilltop. One afternoon, as I mended a torn fence near the corral, tasks blurring between housemaid and whatever else needed doing, trouble struck again. Wyatt was leading a small cattle drive to the watering hole, Jeb and Tommy flanking him, when bandits ambushed from the rocky outcrops. Guns blazed, horses rearing as bullets whizzed like angry hornets. I heard it from the porch, my heart seizing as I dropped my sewing basket. "Ambush!" Tommy yelled, his young voice cracking. Wyatt drew his revolver in a blur, firing back with deadly accuracy. One bandit fell, clutching his chest, but another grazed Wyatt's side, blood blooming on his shirt. He gritted his teeth, fighting fiercely, driving them off with a hail of lead. Jeb took a shot to the leg, crumpling, but Wyatt hauled him onto his horse, covering their retreat. They rode back bloodied and battered, Wyatt's face pale but stoic. Miss Eliza fussed over them in the kitchen, bandaging wounds with whiskey-soaked rags. "Foolish men chasing glory," she muttered. Tommy, wide-eyed, recounted the tale. "Boss saved us all. Shot 3 of 'em clean." Wyatt waved it off. But I saw the toll. His isolation deepening, like each brush with death locked away more of his heart. That night, as thunder cracked like gunfire over the hills, rain pounding the tin roof, he burst inside once more. I was scrubbing the floor again, lantern light flickering. He noticed me in the dim glow, his cold gaze lingering longer than before. Tension built in the air, thick as the storm outside. He didn't speak at first, just watched me with that calculating stare, A flicker of something raw. Vulnerability? Flashing and gone, Eliza's duties became my anchor. I moved like a shadow through the house, polishing saddles until they gleamed, mending fences with wire and determination, dusting forgotten ledgers in the study that smelled of leather and old ink. Each task was a quiet rebellion against the hardship that had toughened me, a way to prove I could endure. Wyatt noticed, though he pretended not to. He'd spot the wilted wildflowers I'd replaced in a cracked vase on the mantel, their purple blooms a splash of color in the drab parlor. The old rocking chair creaked differently, shifted to catch the evening light, and once a faint scent of sage soap trailed me as I passed him in the hall, his head turning slightly, nostrils flaring. One day, while dusting the study, a room off limits without permission, but Miss Alara had insisted, I glimpsed a worn letter on his desk. The edges were frayed, the script elegant. Amelia looped repeatedly, stirring unspoken sorrow. Who was she? A lost love? The war's casualty? My heart ached with curiosity, a pull toward his buried pain. He caught me then, his voice thunderous. Snoopin' in my affairs? I held firm, meeting his gaze. Just cleanin', sir. Didn't mean to pry. His eyes narrowed, but softened a fraction. Dust the ranch, Miss Thorne, but leave my ghosts buried. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. That evening, as I tidied the hall, I hummed a soft tune my mother taught me. A lullaby from better days. Wyatt paused in the doorway, listening, the melody evoking buried memories. It stirred the storm in his chest. I could see it in the clench of his jaw. Then came the stormy night. Lightning flashed like cannon fire, illuminating the parlor as I lit lanterns along the walls. Wyatt stood shadowed by the cold fireplace, his presence a surprise. "Ain't you scared of thunder?" he asked, voice gruff but curious. "No, sir," I replied, steady. "It's the silence in a house where folks don't speak unless forced." Our eyes met, a spark igniting. A gust blew open the shutter, rain lashing in. We rushed to close it, hands brushing, electric, warm despite the chill. Rain soaked us, igniting unspoken thunder within. His breath hitched, my heart raced. In that moment, the push and pull began, a dance of hearts on the edge of something profound. But he pulled back, eyes darkening. "Good night, Miss Thorne." As I retreated, the storm raged on, mirroring the turmoil in my soul. What was this feeling? This draw to a man locked in silence? Little did I know it was just the beginning. Word count. Approximately 1520. Wait, user asked for 5,000 words. I need to expand significantly. Let's continue building. The days that followed the shootout and that stormy encounter blended into a rhythm of hard work and quiet observation. Harlan Ranch was more than a homestead. It was a kingdom carved from the wild, with herds of longhorns dotting the plains like freckles on a sun-baked face. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush and horse sweat, the sun relentless, evoking a resilience that mirrored my own. I'd been toughened by lean times, raised in that run-down shack where dust storms swallowed hopes and the war's shadow loomed long. Mama's illness had forced me to grow up fast, trading dreams for survival, sacrificing sleep to nurse her through fevered nights. "You're my rock, Eliza," she'd whisper, her hand frail in mine. Coming here was for her, to send money back. But already, the ranch was weaving its way into my heart. Miss Alara became an unlikely ally, her sharp tongue hiding a mother's warmth. "You've got spine, girl," she'd say over coffee, her eyes twinkling behind those spectacles. "Most run screaming from Mr. Harlan's glare. But you stand tall." She told stories of the ranch's glory days, before the war stripped it bare, parties under starlit skies, laughter echoing where silence now reigned. Jeb, the foreman, was a font of wisdom, his limp a badge from the Battle of Gettysburg. "Boss is a good man deep down," he'd grumble while mending tack in the barn. "War took his kin, left him hard, but he fights for what's his." Tommy, the young hand, brought levity with his harmonica tunes at dusk, his crush on the miller's daughter making him blush like a sunset.
"Miss Eliza, you ever danced under the moon?"
He'd ask, grinning. Their presence made the ranch feel alive, a family forged in frontier fire. Wyatt, though, he was the enigma. Tall and unyielding, he moved with the grace of a predator, his emotions locked away like gold in a safe. I'd catch glimpses of him riding out on thunder, his silhouette against the horizon, commanding respect from man and beast alike. His leadership was battlefield sharp, overseeing the spread with sparse commands that demanded precision. But beneath it I sensed cracks, the way his hand trembled slightly when pouring coffee, the faraway look in his eyes at supper. One morning, as I polished saddles in the stable, the scent of leather mingling with hay, Tommy rushed in. "Bandits again, Miss Eliza." "Boss is out on the drive, heard shots." My blood ran cold. I dropped the rag and ran to the porch, shielding my eyes against the sun. In the distance, dust clouds rose like smoke signals. Guns blazed, echoes carrying on the wind. Wyatt was ambushed during the cattle drive, bandits swarming from hidden arroyos. Guns blazing, he fought back fiercely, his revolver a extension of his will. A bullet grazed his thigh, pain searing, but he drove them off, taking down 2 with shots that rang true.